All right, so are you ready to dive into Carry On? This new Christmas action flick that's got everyone talking. We've got this critics review that's absolutely glowing. We're even comparing it to classics like Die Hard 2 and Phone Booth, which is pretty high praise right off the bat. They also mention some similarities to the directors, John Colasera, previous work like Nonstop and The Commuter. So the big question is this worth adding to your watch list? Let's find out.
Yeah. It's not every day you see a Christmas action thriller. Trying to blend those two worlds sounds like this critic thinks they pulled it off, which is exciting.
Yeah, I'm always up for something a little different during the holidays, something with a bit more edge than the usual feel-good stuff. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's break down the plot. The review says it's about this TSA officer at LAX, Ethan Kopech, who gets caught in a nightmare scenario on Christmas Day.
Setting it on Christmas Day immediately amps up the tension. You've got that ticking clock element combined with the holiday backdrop. That's clever.
Right. So this guy, Ethan, gets contacted by a mysterious terrorist called the Traveler, who demands he let a suspicious bag through security. And to make matters worse, the Traveler has an accomplice, the Watcher, who's holding Ethan's wife hostage. Talk about high stakes.
Wow, that's a classic thriller setup.
Yeah.
Create those immediate, almost impossible choices for the main character. It seems like a recipe for a really gripping story. And the reviewer mentions you're able to figure out the mystery along with Ethan. That makes me think the screenwriter TJ Fixman has used some smart techniques to keep the audience engaged without giving too much away.
Hold on. Before we get into the how, I gotta know what kind of political commentary did the reviewer pick up on in a Christmas action movie? I mean, that's not what you usually expect from this genre.
Yeah. Well, the reviewer specifically pointed out the irony of peacekeeping forces being used in a way that creates more chaos and violence. It sounds like Fixman is playing with those contradictions, maybe even questioning the motivations and methods of those in power, all within this high-stakes thriller.
Okay, that's way more interesting than just saying there's political commentary. Now I'm curious to see how Fixman pulls that off. You mentioned techniques to keep the audience guessing. What are some of the things screenwriters do to create that sense of discovery?
Well, there are a few classic techniques, like foreshadowing, where they drop subtle hints early on that only make sense later. Or they might use red herrings, deliberately misleading the audience to make the real twists even more surprising.
So you're constantly trying to put the pieces together, but the film is always one step ahead of you.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of active participation for the audience, where they're trying to solve the mystery along with the protagonist. And when it's done well, it can be incredibly rewarding.
Now the reviewer seems to be a huge fan of the director, Jaume Collet-Serra. They were especially excited about his return to his roots. After that foray into big-budget stuff like Black Adam.
Yeah. Collet-Serra has made a name for himself with those tight, suspenseful thrillers, often set in confined spaces, nonstop on a plane, The Commuter on a train. It seems like he has a knack for creating tension in those contained environments. And Carry On, set in an airport, is like a perfect fit for his style.
Yeah, the review is gushing over how he uses every aspect of filmmaking, the visuals, the editing, even the music, to keep you on the edge of your seat. They even admitted to cheering out loud at home.
Oh, wow. That's great. It speaks to Collet-Serra's ability to create those visceral, heart-pounding moments. And the fact he's able to achieve that within the confines of an airport, a place we all know, is even more impressive. It makes that danger feel more real, more relatable.
Okay, so we've got a tense plot, a clever writer, and a director who knows how to crank up the suspense. But what about our hero Ethan Kopech, played by Taron Egerton? The reviewer was seriously impressed, even going so far as to compare him to Bruce Willis in Die Hard.
Die Hard is practically the blueprint for the trapped hero action movie. And John McClane is one of those iconic action heroes. That's high praise indeed. Sounds like Egerton delivers.
Right. They loved that Egerton wasn't afraid to show Ethan's vulnerability, his fear and stress. They even mentioned a detail about him throwing up from the pressure. It's not your typical action hero swagger, is it?
And that's probably what makes it so compelling. When you see a hero who's genuinely scared, who's struggling to cope with the situation, it makes their courage and resilience even more impactful. It makes them human. You find yourself rooting for them even harder.
Totally.
Like,
It's that relatability, that vulnerability, that makes you really invest in the character. And the reviewer specifically called out how refreshing it was to see an action hero who isn't just a stoic, one-dimensional badass.
it makes you wonder if that vulnerability, that willingness to show weakness, is what separates a good action hero from a truly great one.
Well, before we go full film critic ourselves, Let's talk about the supporting cast. The reviewer mentioned some really strong performances.
They were especially impressed with Jason Bateman, Sophia Carson,
Huh.
and Danielle Deadwyler.
Hmm.
It's an interesting mix of actors,
Yeah,
coming from different backgrounds and genres.
right. And they said Bateman was chilling as the villain. That's a departure from his usual comedic roles. And get this, they mentioned Danielle Deadwyler's character has a rather unique way of killing people. Apparently, she's not afraid to get creative. They even mentioned a hilarious cameo from Logan Marshall Green and solid performances from Benito Martinez and Thea Rossi.
Yeah, having those memorable performances, even in smaller roles,
Mm.
can really elevate a film. It makes the world feel more lived in, more believable. You start to care about even the characters on the periphery, which makes the stakes even higher.
It's like if you don't care about the people who are in danger, the tension just doesn't work. So it sounds like Carry On has a pretty solid cast from top to bottom. Okay, so we've got a great cast, a suspenseful plot, a talented director. But does it all come together? Does the reviewer think Carry On has what it takes to become a Christmas classic?
Well, they declared it the best Christmas movie of the year, but stopped short of calling it an all-time classic. For now, at least.
So maybe they need more time to let it sink in. See if it has that staying power. It does make you wonder, what makes a Christmas movie stand the test of time? What are those ingredients that make it more than just a seasonal favorite?
I think it needs to capture the spirit of the holidays, whether it's the joy, the warmth, the family traditions, or even the chaos that can come with this time of year. You should be able to watch it year after year and still discover something new to appreciate.
Yeah, it needs those memorable characters, those quotable lines, those iconic moments that stick with you long after the credits roll. And it should evoke a certain feeling, a sense of nostalgia, maybe even comfort that makes you want to revisit it time and time again.
Exactly. It's a high bar to clear.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Carry On has some of those elements. It's set during Christmas. It deals with themes of family and sacrifice.
Yeah.
And it has that classic good versus evil showdown.
Right. But it's also an action thriller, which is not your typical Christmas fare. Maybe that's what makes it so interesting, that unexpected twist on the genre.
Yeah, it could be a refreshing alternative to the usual heartwarming holiday movies.
Mm-hmm.
And if it manages to balance that action and suspense with some genuine heart and a holiday spirit, maybe it does have a shot at becoming a new classic.
The reviewer seems to think so. They were really impressed with the overall impact of the film, especially how it handled even those smaller roles, giving them depth and making the audience care about their fate. It made me think about how important those seemingly minor characters are in a story like this.
Absolutely. It's easy to overlook those smaller roles, but they can be crucial to a film's success, especially in tense thriller. When you make those characters feel real and relatable, it raises the stakes for the entire story.
You know, it's like if you only see those airport employees as nameless, faceless background characters, you're not as invested in whether they live or die. But if the film takes the time to give them personalities' backstories, maybe even just a few lines of dialogue, suddenly they become real people with families, hopes, and dreams.
Exactly. It's that human connection that makes the danger feel more immediate, more personal. It's like the difference between hearing about a tragedy on the news and knowing someone who was personally affected by it. That personal connection amplifies the emotional impact.
And that heightened emotional impact, that sense of empathy for even the smallest characters, is what makes a good thriller truly great. It's not just about the explosions and the chase scenes. It's about those human moments, those connections that make you care about what happens on screen.
It sounds like Carry On understands that and
Oh.
uses it to its advantage.
Okay, so the reviewer was clearly a big fan of Taron Egerton as the lead, even comparing him to Bruce Willis. And it sounds like the supporting cast is top-notch as well. But what about the director, Jean-Collet Serra? This review almost feels like a love letter to his style.
The reviewer definitely seems to appreciate Colette Serra's return to those tightly wound, suspenseful thrillers he's known for. They even lamented his foray into big-budget films like Black Adam, suggesting it wasn't the best fit for his talents.
So you think he's better suited to these smaller-scale, character-driven stories?
Well, based on this review and his previous work, it seems like he thrives in those environments, where he can really focus on building tension and suspense. He's got a knack for creating those edge-of-your-seat moments, even within confined spaces.
And it sounds like Carry On plays to those strengths. The reviewer was praising his use of cinematography, editing, music, even the set design, all working together to create this immersive, thrilling experience. They're practically giddy describing some of the action sequences.
It makes you wonder if this could be a turning point in Colette Serra's career. Maybe after Black Adam, he realized that his true passion lies in crafting these intense, character-driven thrillers. And maybe Carry On is his way of reclaiming that space, showing the world what he does best.
You know, the reviewer actually expressed hope that Collett Sarah and Egerton would team up again for future projects. And honestly, after hearing all this, I'm kind of on board with that idea. What do you think? What kind of movie would you like to see them make together?
That's an interesting question. Based on what we've discussed, they seem to have a great synergy, a shared understanding of what makes a good thriller. I think it would be fascinating to see them tackle a psychological thriller, something that really digs into the characters' minds and explores themes of paranoia, manipulation, and moral ambiguity.
Ooh, I like where you're going with this. Something dark and twisty, something that keeps you guessing until the very end.
Exactly. Collett Sarah's talent for creating suspense and atmosphere, combined with Egerton's ability to portray complex characters with depth and vulnerability, could make for a truly gripping film.
And imagine the possibilities if they set it during the holidays again. A Christmas-themed psychological thriller. That's a recipe for some seriously edgy entertainment.
You're on to something. It would be a unique and unexpected twist on the traditional holiday movie, something that could really stand out from the crowd.
I can already picture it. Snow falling, twinkling lights, and a chilling mystery unfolding in the background. It'd be the perfect blend of festive cheer and nail-biting suspense.
It could be a modern take on a classic holiday tale like A Christmas Carol, but with a darker, more psychological edge.
Oh, I love that. Imagine Egerton playing a Scrooge-like character who's haunted by his past and forced to confront his demons during the Christmas season.
And Collett Sarah could use those haunting visuals and eerie sound design he's known for to create a truly unsettling atmosphere. It would be a Christmas movie unlike any other.
All right, so we've got our pitch. A Christmas-themed psychological thriller starring Taron Egerton and directed by Jean Collett Sarah. We should send this to Hollywood right away.
I know I'd watch it. It does sound like a winning combination.
Okay, before we get too carried away with our own movie ideas, let's bring it back to Carry On. This review is overwhelmingly positive. It sounds like a must-watch for fans of action thrillers and anyone who enjoys Jean Collett Sarah's style.
Absolutely. The reviewer's enthusiasm is contagious,
Yeah.
and they've definitely piqued my interest.
Mine too. And it sounds like a nice change of pace from all those sugary sweet holiday movies out there.
It's definitely an alternative, something with grit and excitement. And who knows, maybe it'll become a new holiday tradition for action movie fans.
All right, so if you're looking for a thrilling ride this holiday season, Carry On seems like a solid choice. It's got action suspense, a touch of holiday spirit, and maybe even a bit more depth than you'd expect.
It sounds like it has a little something for everyone.
Well, that about covers everything from the review. Hopefully you, our listener, now have a better idea of whether Carry On is worth adding to your watch list. You know, it's funny, we were just talking about how Collett Sarah seems to excel at those more contained, character-driven thrillers, and it got me thinking about some of his other movies, like Nonstop and The Commuter.
Yeah.
Do you see any connections between those films and Carry On?
Absolutely. There's a definite through line in his work. A focus on ordinary people, thrust into extraordinary, often life or death situations. You've got Liam Neeson trapped on a plane, nonstop, then on a train in The Commuter, and now Taron Egerton facing down a terrorist threat in an airport.
It's like he's drawn to these stories of everyday heroes, regular folks forced to step up and become something more when the pressure is on. Is that what you think the reviewer is responding to in Collett Sarah's work?
Yeah. It's definitely part of his appeal. There's a relatability to his characters, a sense that they could be any one of us. And that makes the stakes feel higher, because you can imagine yourself in their shoes. It's not some superhuman action hero saving the day. It's someone like you or me, facing down incredible odds.
That's a good point. And it seems like Collett Sarah has a knack for creating those nail-biting scenarios, even within those confined settings.
Yeah.
You mentioned the plane in Nonstop, the train in The Commuter, and now an airport in Carry On. It's almost like he's turning these familiar everyday spaces into pressure cookers.
He really is. He's a master of building tension, using those confined spaces to his advantage. Think about it. An airport is already a place filled with anticipation and anxiety, that sense of urgency, and then you introduce this high-stakes terrorist threat into that environment. It's a recipe for pure suspense.
And you're surrounded by all these people, potential victims, which adds another layer of tension. You're constantly scanning the crowd, wondering who might be involved, who might be in danger.
Exactly. And it sounds like Collett Sarah utilizes that to great effect in Carry On, keeping you guessing, keeping you on edge throughout the film. It's no wonder the reviewer was so enthusiastic.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up the reviewers' enthusiasm because they made a comment that I wanted to get your take on. They mentioned that Khaled Sarah's previous foray into big budget filmmaking with Black Adam didn't quite hit the mark for them. It almost felt like they were disappointed he'd strayed from those smaller, more personal stories.
Hmm. That's a really insightful observation. And it makes you wonder if there's a lesson there, not just for Call It Sarah, but for filmmakers in general. Maybe sometimes bigger isn't always better. Maybe sometimes those smaller, more character-driven stories are where the real magic happens.
I think you're onto something. You know, when you strip away all the special effects and the spectacle, it all comes down to character story and emotion, and it sounds like that's what Khaled Sarah excels at. He's able to create those intimate, high-stakes moments that really resonate with the audience.
And maybe Carry On is a sign that he's returning to his roots, focusing on those strengths that made him such a compelling filmmaker in the first place. It's exciting to think about what he might do next, now that he seems to have rediscovered that passion for these kinds of stories.
It certainly sounds like he's hit his stride with this one. And who knows, maybe Terry On will inspire a whole new wave of character-driven thrillers, proving that you don't need a massive budget and CGI explosions to create a truly gripping cinematic experience.
That would be fantastic. We could all use a little more heart and substance in our action movies.
Couldn't agree more. Well, it seems like we've explored just about every facet of this Carry On review. We've unpacked the plot, dissected the characters, analyzed the director's style, and even dreamt up some potential future projects.
We have. We've certainly taken a deep dive into this film, even without seeing it ourselves.
And that's the beauty of deep dives, right? We get to explore these ideas, these stories, these creative endeavors, and hopefully spark some interesting conversations along the way.
Exactly. It's all about expanding our horizons, stimulating our curiosity, and discovering those hidden gems that we might otherwise have missed.
And hopefully you, our listener, have come away with a better sense of what Carry On is all about. Maybe we've even convinced you to add it to your watch list. But even if you decide to skip this one, hopefully we've given you something to think about, something to ponder.
That's what we always strive for, to ignite those sparks of curiosity, to inspire you to explore further, to dive deeper into the world around you.
Until next time, keep watching, keep wondering, and keep those minds engaged. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something new and exciting. Thanks for listening.